The barn door groaned in the cold. The cattle bells trembled in the wind, a thin, wavering chime drifting through the dark. Clay Mercer tightened his coat. Sold his best stallion at dawn. Because Widow Mara whispered a name she shouldn't know. A name only Clay's dead brother ever spoke. She said it came to her in a dream. Said the child's medicine would arrive on Christmas morning, if Clay followed that name into the storm. Do me a favor and tip your hat to this video by clicking that like button. Click subscribe to join our growing family. The cattle bells trembled in the wind again that morning. Thin, hollow, like they were calling someone who was never coming back. Clay Mercer stood in the doorway of the barn, staring at the empty stall where his best stallion used to be. Sold at dawn, coins still cold in his pocket, a trade that felt like cutting out a piece of himself. Snow drifted across the yard in slow, sideways sheets, the kind that swallowed sound, except for the bells, always the bells. He had lived like this for 3 winters, talking to no one, expecting nothing, carrying a grief that settled into his bones the way frost settles into fence posts. He shut the barn door. The hinges groaned like an old man waking. Another reminder that everything on this ranch was tired, including him. Clay stepped toward the porch, boots sinking into the frozen earth. The bells chimed again behind him, a sad little tremor. He paused without meaning to, listening the way a man listens to a distant memory he doesn't want to feel. He shook it off and climbed the steps. The floorboards creaked under his weight. The house felt colder inside than the wind outside. He hadn't lit a fire in 2 days. Didn't see the point. Then he saw the tracks. Small boots, light stride, not his. Clay narrowed his eyes. Snow still falling, but the tracks were fresh, leading straight to his door. He reached for the rifle leaning beside the wall, his fingers brushing the worn wood like greeting a familiar, unwelcome friend. He didn't chamber around, not yet, but his heart shifted with a stubborn kick, reminding him he was still alive enough to be cautious. A soft sound drifted through the cold, not the bells this time. A cough, ragged, and then a voice, quiet as a dying flame. "Mr. Mercer, please." Clay froze. He knew that voice, Widow Mara Walker. He opened the door. She stood there in the swirling snow, holding a bundled child against her chest. Her eyes were rimmed with fear, and something else, something he didn't want to name. The wind pushed at her cloak. The cattle bells trembled again behind them. "Let us in," she whispered. Clay stepped aside, and the innocent crossed his threshold. The fire popped softly in the stove, a warm sound, a living sound. Clay wasn't used to it filling his house. Mara sat near the hearth, unwrapping the child from the heavy blanket. The boy's breaths were thin, fluttery, a sound that made Clay's shoulders tense without his permission. He set a pot of water to heat. Steam lifted in slow ribbons. The house smelled like pine smoke and thawing wool, strange comforts he had forgotten. The cattle bells chimed faintly outside, a lonely note carried through the walls. Mara looked toward the sound as if it meant something. Clay felt his jaw tighten. He didn't like how she seemed to recognize it. He ladled warm water into a tin cup and handed it to her. Her fingers brushed his, brief, accidental, but enough to chip at the ice around his ribs. The child stirred, whimpered. Mara hummed to him, a tune Clay had never heard but somehow felt familiar in the corners of his memory. He watched her, a quiet ache rising in him like heat from the stove. A gust slammed the shutters. The fire jumped. Clay's hand moved toward his rifle out of habit. Old instincts, old ghosts. He lowered it slowly, embarrassed by the reflex. "Storm's getting worse," he muttered. Mara nodded. He always hated storms. Clay blinked. "Who?" She hesitated. "Your brother." The words landed heavier than the snow on the roof. Clay felt the room tilt. His throat tightened like a rope pulling taut. She couldn't know that. She shouldn't know that. The cattle bells trembled again, a soft, uncertain chime. Later, Clay brought out blankets from the cedar chest. He hadn't opened it since the funeral. The cedar scent drifted through the room like something waking after a long sleep. Mara spread one across the floor near the stove. The boy reached for Clay's coat sleeve, tiny fingers curling around the fabric. Clay froze, then let the child hold on. The fire's warmth pressed deeper into the house, but outside, something moved in the dark, a crunch of distant snow, a reminder that storms weren't the only things closing in. The morning light never warmed the snow, it just made the cold brighter, sharper. Clay stepped onto the porch with his coffee, listening. Only the faint tremble of the cattle bells broke the silence. Inside, Mara fed the boy spoonfuls of broth. The smell of herbs drifted through the doorway, a small, homely comfort, but Clay's shoulders stayed stiff. Something in the air felt wrong. A distant hoofbeat rolled across the white fields. Single, slow, measured. Clay set his cup down. His breath steamed in front of him like smoke from a new fire. He walked to the edge of the porch, saw nothing, just snow swirling in lazy circles, as if trying to hide the world. But he knew a rider when he heard one, knew the rhythm of a hunting pace. Inside, the iron stove popped loudly. The child startled. Mara pulled him close. Clay felt the tension coil in his gut, warmth inside, cold dread outside, two worlds fighting over the same roof. Around noon, the rider appeared, far off, a dark speck cutting across the pale land. Clay watched the figure move with a confidence he despised, a confidence men bought with money and stolen power. He shut the door, locked it. The click echoed like a verdict. Mara looked up at him. He found us. Her voice trembled like the bells outside. Clay grabbed his rifle and set it on the table. Not a threat, a promise. The boy's eyes followed the movement, wide but strangely calm. Later, as Clay boarded the windows, a loose plank snapped under his boot. He caught himself hard against the wall, breath punching out of him. Another reminder. The house was old, he was older, and the man coming for them wasn't. Twilight settled like a bruise across the ranch. The cattle bells shivered again in the growing dark. The rider stopped at the far fence, didn't speak, didn't move, just watched. Clay felt the warmth of the home at his back, the cold teeth of danger in front, and in the space between, a choice forming like ice cracking under weight. The dawn came gray and thin, offering no warmth, only a pale light crawling across the floorboards. Clay stood by the window, rifle in hand, watching frost bloom across the glass. The cattle bells trembled outside, unsteady, anxious. Mara wrapped the boy tighter in a quilt. Her eyes never strayed from Clay. "He won't wait," she whispered. Clay nodded once. He felt the truth of it in his bones. A fist struck the door, slow, deliberate, the kind of knock a man uses when he believes the house already belongs to him. Clay stepped forward, opened the door halfway. The land baron sat tall on his horse, breath fogging like steam from a furnace. Two hired guns flanked him, faces empty, hands near holsters. "You have something of mine," the baron said. Clay didn't answer. He only stepped outside and pulled the door closed behind him. Cold wrapped around him like iron. The baron smiled. "Bring her out, bring the child." Clay raised his rifle, not shaking, not wavering, just ready. The air snapped tight, a moment stretched thin enough to tear. One of the hired guns twitched. Clay fired first. The shot cracked across the snowfield, echoing sharp as splitting timber. The man dropped. The horse screamed and bolted. The second gunman grabbed for his weapon, stumbling in the drifts. Clay fired again. Silence swallowed the echo. Only the faint chime of the bells remained, shivering in the aftermath. The Baron sat frozen, anger tightening his jaw. "You're willing to die for her?" Clay lowered the rifle a fraction. "Not dying today." A door hinge creaked behind him. Mara stepped out, holding something in her hands, a small tin locket, worn smooth with age. She opened it and held it toward Clay. "Your brother gave me this," she said softly. "Years ago, he saved me, told me, if anything ever happened to him, I was to find you. That you'd protect us." Clay felt the world tilt. Memories he'd buried under winters of silence surged up. His brother's laugh, his recklessness, his quiet heart. The Baron spat into the snow. "Fairy tales." But Mara shook her head. "He told me the name you two made up as kids. The one no one else knew." Clay stared at her. Heat rose behind his eyes. She whispered the name, a word that hit him like a hand to the chest. The Baron scowled, realizing the ground had shifted beneath him. He reached for his gun. Clay fired a final time. The man toppled into the snow, swallowed by the cold he'd brought with him. Silence returned, heavy, but no longer empty. The cattle bells trembled again, not with fear this time, but relief. Clay stepped inside with Mara and the boy. Warmth closed around them like a new promise, and for the first time in years, Clay let it in. Gentle, unhurried, Clay Mercer stepped outside with a quiet breath, feeling warmth on his face for the first time in too many winters. Behind him, the stove hummed low inside the cabin, a steady companion, a heartbeat for a home that once felt dead. Mara's laughter drifted through the open doorway, light, small, but real. The boy clapped at something she showed him, the sound quick and bright like sparrows waking in spring. Clay paused, letting the moment settle against him like a warm hand. Then the cattle bells chimed across the yard, not trembling, not frightened, but easy, swaying on a mild breeze. The sound washed over him, no longer a lonely cry. Now it felt like an echo of welcome. He walked toward the fence line. The snow was thinning, revealing frozen earth ready to breathe again. As he reached the gate, he spotted a broken fence post leaning from the storm, a small reminder of the chaos that had swept through. Clay pressed his palm to the wood, cold, still cracked, but fixable. Everything was fixable now. He carried the post back to the yard. The boy toddled out, wrapped in a quilt far too big for him. Clay knelt, setting the post down. The child watched him with wide, steady eyes. "Help?" the boy asked. Clay handed him a small wooden mallet. The boy tapped the post once. A soft thud. A beginning. Mara stepped out onto the porch, shawl around her shoulders. The wind brushed her hair, carrying the faint scent of pine smoke from the stove. "You're working early," she said. Clay shrugged. "Feels like the right day to start fixing things." Her smile held warmth the sun couldn't match, but beneath it, Clay noticed the faint worry that still lingered in the corners of her eyes, a habit born from too many months of running. He set the boy's mallet aside and approached her. "We're safe," he said quietly. "Storm's over." A moment of silence lived between them. Not cold, not distant, just settling, like dust after a long ride. Inside, the kettle hissed softly. Mara's hands tightened around the railing. "What if someone else comes?" she whispered. Clay looked out at the wide land, snow retreating, hills brightening under the sun. He felt the weight of the rifle inside the cabin, the certainty in his chest. "Then they'll find a family waiting," he said, "and a man willing to stand again." The wind picked up, carrying another chime from the cattle bells, smooth, warm, almost musical. Mara's shoulders eased. The boy tugged at her skirt, diggling as a ray of sunlight caught the locket at her neck. Clay reached down and lifted the child. The boy settled against him without fear, without hesitation, as if he had always belonged there. I want to hear from you in the comments below. If you enjoyed our time together, please make sure you're subscribed and ring that notification bell so you never miss a tale. Until next time, Keep your powder dry.